So the hardcores, the dedicated reporters, that's good. They told me if I did this, nobody would come, but I said, I think they will. So maybe we'll continue these throughout the summer. Probably not every week, because you guys probably want to cover the campaign. But some of you are Capitol reporters. Do Capitol reporters cover the campaign too? Okay, so maybe we'll let you off the hook, like right around the primary. Yeah, I wanted to do this at 3-something in the morning after the vote. Or no, it wasn't. It was, what was it? I have my time mixed up. It was like 8 in the morning after the vote, but I just thought, when are you guys going to write your stories, So we decided to give you a couple days just to debrief on things and answer questions, and I appreciate you all being here. Like I said, they told me nobody would come, but I thought maybe they will. And I'm going to keep doing these as long as you guys show up. And they told me there's a lot of people watching on the live stream, all of the Detroit TV stations and many others, so I appreciate that. I actually have the biggest reach on social media of any caucus in the country. I don't know if you guys know that. Maybe MERS can look into that since there's not going to be as much going on in the Capitol. But yeah, we looked at the Facebook and the Instagram and the Twitter, X, all of it. And the Republicans in the House, we have the biggest reach of anybody. So we could do it that way, but I still like to talk to you guys, Brinks and Whitmer don't, but I do. So even though I could do it on social media and reach probably more people, I still believe we should interact with the press and answer their questions. Even though there's a couple dishonest reporters that are lying about the budget, I still feel that most of you are trying to get the facts. You're trying to report the truth, and that's why I keep showing up here every week. I thought it was very interesting. I saw a quote in one of the papers where Sarah Anthony, no, it was on Channel 3, a highly respected Channel 3 in Kalamazoo. Sarah Anthony said this was the most bipartisan budget that she's ever been a part of. And you know what that means. When I heard that, that means the Republicans got the most wins in this budget of any budget that she's ever been a part of. That's what she means by that. That was just a very nice way of saying it because, the 2 years when there was a Democrat trifecta, that was not very bipartisan. We know that. And then last year, all right, so if this year, if it's 2-on-1, Democrat governor, Democrat Senate, Republican House, if this year was more bipartisan than last year, that would mean that it was more balanced between the Republicans and the Democrats. If it was more balanced toward the Democrats, then Sarah Anthony would not be able to say it was more bipartisan than last year. So I thought that was a real slick way of saying it, and I give her credit for being honest about that it was more bipartisan. I viewed it as the most decisive victory for the Republicans in a budget in a long time. That's how I put it. Sarah Anthony put it as the most bipartisan budget that she's been a part of. But either way, there's no way to deny that the Republicans won the budget decisively and much more than even last year. When a lot of you people were talking about all the wins we got last year, it was actually more this year, and that's validated by Sarah Anthony's comment that it was the most bipartisan budget. And she said that despite the fact that we denied her Sarah Anthony Park. You know, we had a beautiful capital outlay budget, and a lot of our members went to battle for their community colleges. And these were community colleges that were very highly rated and universities that were very highly rated. They do an independent analysis and they rate all the projects. And then what happens is when they're deciding which universities get new buildings and who gets their other capital projects, then it becomes pure politics. And it really is just decided based on brute political force. And so what you saw for years and years, a lot of these community colleges and universities would have the highest rated projects and they wouldn't get funded in the capital outlay. Some of those examples include North Central, which is a big community college in Parker Fairbarns District that wanted a center for virtual learning and digital, and they got funded this year. They were #1 every year for 5 years and never got it till this year. Timmy Beeson did a great job on the #2 rated one at Delta Community College, the Student Resource Center. That was a big one, and it was #2 for years, and they wouldn't fund it. And Timmy Beeson got it done this year. I was really proud to see that. You know, Ferris State University, that one had been left off, and Tom Kuntz and I worked to put that back in. So they got their capital outlay for the Allied Sciences building. So there were a lot of big ones in there. You know, Lake Superior State, that was rated #2 for the Center for Applied Science. And we went to war on that with our members and got that done. So there were a lot of really good ones in there. We saw Noss Hall get done for Western, a lot of them. So we were really happy to do that on the capital outlay. Some big wins in there. And the highly rated ones finally got through. It's amazing that the highly rated ones don't get through. Another one was Kellogg Community College. That was highly rated. That was the #4 rated. And that got overlooked for years and years. And Steve Frisbee got that done for the Roll Health and Administration building. So eventually when you get to it, you'll see that that was a decisive win, but what we had to take out in order to fund all of those important community colleges and universities, we had to take out the Sarah Anthony Capital Park. It was a shame, but it had to be done. We even moved Michigan State for their engineering building to both. They call it planning and construction. We did it both. We did that, and guess what? Their president's coming back, so he has to be very excited. He's going to have a brand new engineering building that's moving quicker than the others, so I was happy to help with that and happy to hear he's coming back. But anyway, when you look at the Sarah Anthony Capitol Park, and this is the park she was trying to build behind the Capitol, between the Capitol and the administrative buildings. And Sarah was saying, if we build this park, then all of the state workers will come back voluntarily. This is why they're not here, is because there's not enough green space for them to congregate around. So if we have it, they'll just come back, they'll want to work, and then hang out at this park. But it was a very expensive park. It was $25 million, and we couldn't do it. And but we still did, according to her, the most bipartisan budget that she's been a part of, which is a good thing. I don't think that's how you get the state workers back. Now, you saw in the budget that we require a uniform policy. The Whitmer administration fought us on this, but they eventually relented. We need a uniform policy for the departments with their workforce, because what you're seeing now is some of them, their policy, some of the departments is like 1 day a month. And then you have other ones where they're here 3 days a week. And so what we need is a uniform policy, and this budget requires it to be published so we can all see it, because right now none of us can get these policies. I have the swipe card data, and it's very bad. It's probably less than 25% of the workers are coming into work. So these buildings are empty, but they won't show us their policies. But with this new budget law, they're going to have to show us their policies. Once we establish a uniform policy and it's published, then we can all scrutinize that policy. I'm hopeful that it will bring the workers back to work. Something that's still required in the law this year, the new budget law, they're supposed to be at 80%. They're not doing that. What they're doing is they're just assigning names to desks and the people are not coming into work. Hopefully with a new governor and a new administration, we'll see improvement there, but we're happy they're going to publish a policy. I was really happy to see that we delivered on a budget smaller than last year. You saw that I won. There were no tax increases, no fee increases, no rate of the state rainy day fund, and we cut another $800 million from, well, it was really $3 billion, so we cut $3 billion. And this was actually smaller than the House budget, which was kind of crazy. So we passed a House budget, and then the final budget was smaller than the House budget. I thought there was $2 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse that we could find from the outside, because what happens is you're looking at it from the outside. But when we got in with the state budget office and the fiscal agencies were working with the budget office, we found another $1 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse. So we cut $3 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse from the budget, but because there's like $2 billion of funding for schools, more than last year, and because there's what they call investments, so there's increases in spending in some places, we netted $800 million cut year over year. So that will be the second year in a row we cut the budget by $800 million. And according to the fiscal estimates that I've seen, we're going to have to cut it by another $500 million next year. And this is all because of the greatest roads deal ever made, where we cut $800 million of waste, fraud, and abuse permanently from government. And then what we did is we dedicated that to roads permanently, and then we delivered no tax on tips, overtime, Social Security. What that did was it forced this situation where we cut another $800 million from the budget this year, even with investing $2 billion more in schools. And the reason we invested $2 billion more in schools is because there was $2 billion that just showed up in the school aid fund. It's crazy. I mean, we had to do all kinds of things to cut or to find $2 billion for roads. And then we just woke up to do the budget one day, and there was $2 billion more than last year sitting there for schools. So the fact that we cut the budget while putting $2 billion more into schools was a big feat. And I think a lot of the dishonest reporting is taking away from a lot of the cuts that were made. I mean, no one has reported that the Eagle Department was cut by 30%. I've not seen anyone report that. Maybe the Midwesterner has. 30% cut to Eagle. And that was 2-on-1, right? Democrat governor, Democrat Senate. We cut Eagle 30%. They're masking that with all of the confusing rhetoric. We cut a lot of places. We cut 6%. It's 6.33% in the Department of Technology, Management, and Budget. Is that what it is? DTMB. We cut there. We made a lot of cuts. MDE went down 3%. The Agriculture Department went down 6.82%. There were a lot all over. We cut LARA 2%. There were a lot. I'm looking on here for one more. Oh yeah, and on the general fund, on the DNR, we cut it 13%. So I think that was a big one. And so what we're doing is we're starting the process of right-sizing government. But that was a big one. I mean, that 30% cut to Eagle, I gave that number to Cam Cavett, and he was just thrilled. You know, he in his district, they don't like Eagle very much. I mean, you ask people, you say, Are you getting better service out of Eagle these days than you did in the past? I've not met one person who would say they're getting better service out of Eagle, and so we cut them 30%. I think that was really important to do, and truthfully, we could have cut them a lot more than that. We will in the future. But I think overall we did a very good job cutting the budget, blocking their tax increases, blocking their fee increases, and as I went through it, there were a lot of tough choices. I mean, you saw that the pork was way down, and what Democrats were forced to do in this budget was they were forced to choose between protecting grant programs, protecting Whitmer departments, and funding their pork. And what's happening in the discussion, I'll just is that the cuts that are made are kind of masked. I'll try not to get too technical with you, but since other people are getting very technical, I'll try to explain this, and then you guys can go back and look. So these budget experts, they talk about ongoing and one time. All right, and so when they're talking about a cut, a lot of the time, so like when they say arts and culture grants were cut by 700,000, they're talking about ongoing. So if you look at ongoing last year, ongoing this year, which is how the baseline budget is built, it was cut 700,000, roughly. But if you look at what they call, okay, I don't view the budget that way because I'm not one of these budget people. I just look at how much was spent on something last year and how much was spent on something this year. So I don't look at one time or ongoing. If you do that analysis, you'll see that the cuts are actually much deeper than what's being reported. Like you look at the arts and culture grants, they were something like 13.5 million last year. There's something like 11.5 million this year. So what's being reported as a $700,000 cut is actually a $2 million cut because the Democrats couldn't plug that with the one-time funding this year. So if you do the analysis that way, what you'll see in total spending is a lot of these things were cut much more than people know as we're eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse from the budget. And that's why there's a lot less pork, because Democrats were forced to spend their pork money on protecting some of these programs. One example is you saw that we finally got rid of the 21st Century Fund, where they were putting in about $75 million a year, which was the biggest remaining pot for economic development for the state. I killed that sunset. Now that money will no longer go to the economic development. It goes into the general fund, and the MEDC will have to fight for funding each year and try to justify their spending. So the Whitmer team, they put $3 or $4 million of their pork money into that fund, and so it got a little funding. Now it dropped from 75 million down to 3 or 4 million, but those were the kind of choices they were forced to make. Otherwise, it would have got zero for the BCAR, whatever that is. But that's how they fund a lot of the economic development programs. So I think as you have more time to digest and analyze this, you'll see how decisive the victory was for the Republicans, and how we're finally dismantling the waste, fraud, and abuse all over the government. We cut another 250 ghost employees from the state budget. These were fake workers that they were just using to pad the budget. And if you look through the House fiscal analysis, you'll see where they were. My recollection is a lot of them were in Lara. There was a lot of waste in Lara that we got rid of, where they had fake workers that they never listed for employment, they never hired, and we took those out. And there's another 3,000 that we found, and we'll get rid of those next year. So overall, since I became speaker, we've gotten rid of 2,251 ghost employees, and we found another 3,000 that we'll get rid of next year. That's saving the taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So I'm happy that we did that, and I appreciate those of you that honestly reported that. But you can see the Democrats quickly adopted the idea that I put forward in the budget, focusing on real dollars spent. And what you found was you could cut basically $3 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse in the budget if you focused on the real dollars spent. And they started looking at these things and saying, wow, we've over budgeted 50% of the line items in this budget by $3 billion. We can cut a lot of that waste, fraud, and abuse, and instead of putting it in our slush funds and creating $600 million a year that they've been collecting on interest with too much money that they're just sitting on. They could just stop over budgeting and we could right-size these lines to the real dollar spent. And the Democrats embraced that very early. They were very critical of it when I was doing it, and then when we got behind closed doors, they right away adopted this. They said, wow, we've never looked at how much money we're actually spending before. We can't believe it, that we're over budgeting by $3 billion. We could just cut that, and that will help us go a long way toward solving this budget issue that we have where we need to make cuts. So the ghost employees are part of that, right? If they have fake workers that they're getting funding for, that they're not hiring year after year after year to pad their departments, that's part of real dollar spent, is getting rid of the fake workers. So they embraced that very early, and I was happy to see that. It was a radical idea at first in Lansing, but if you talk to regular people, it makes sense. Why don't we just look at the dollars we're spending and adjust for the dollars we're spending instead of just over budgeting every year? That was a key reason why we didn't have to raise taxes or raid for the state rainy day fund. I really encourage everyone to look carefully at the new language that I negotiated in the DHHS budget related to our Medicaid program, related to our and some of the other budgets on our food stamps program, the autism funding, and also child care. I thought we made some real steps there. What's been going on is that people are getting programs like Medicaid and food stamps without ever being checked for eligibility. So they call it self-attestation. What it is you fill out a form and say you're eligible, and then without doing any checks, they just start paying you welfare. And remember, this welfare comes from hardworking Michigan taxpayers, and you get somebody who fills out a form, maybe they fill it out dishonestly, and then they start getting welfare. Now we're forcing the administration to check and say, okay, if they say they're eligible, then check. Look and see if they're citizens. Look for their eligibility. We can verify that very easily. We're going to be looking at people that are getting food stamps and they're only spending exclusively out of state. And we're going to start finally looking at that and saying, why are they not using food stamps in Michigan? Are they potentially not living in Michigan? Are they potentially double dipping in multiple states? That happens a lot more than you think. And so I was very happy to see we're going to be checking federal records like the death records and the Social Security records and tax records. If people are reporting incomes to the government that do not match up with what they're filling out on these applications, then they're not eligible for these programs. We want these programs to exist for decades for people that they were intended for people that are in need, not for scammers and people committing fraud. I thought we did some very important things on the child care where we're finally going to be looking at attendance records. So you saw like in Minnesota and where there were these scams going on where the providers would collect all kinds of taxpayer money for child care, and they were not providing child care. They were empty child care centers. So now there's going to be a lot of emphasis put on attendance, tracking attendance, and coming up with a plan in advance. If they're not attending, there better be a reason why they're continuing to get paid, the providers, if the kids are not attending. So I think that's going to cut down on a lot of the fraud in our child care system that you're seeing all over the country. Michigan, I believe, is number 6 in the amount of government funding that we're spending on autism funding, autism services, and you're seeing in a lot of these states a lot of fraud in the autism spending. The same thing where the providers are falsifying things and scamming people. And so you saw in this budget a number of protections put in place to ensure that we stop the fraud in the autism system. And so overall, I think that was one of our major focuses, was we need to crack down on the fraud in our welfare systems. You know, the Whitmer administration was trying very hard to bring in another 425 permanent government employees to administer Medicaid and food stamp work requirements. We were able to change that to temporary workers. I just looked at it this way, like, okay, so we have a short-term issue here where when the work requirements take effect on the Medicaid and the food stamps, where there's a lot of work that's going to have to go on in the front end to find all the scammers and to remove them from the rolls, and also to educate new people and make sure that they're, know how to fill out the forms and stuff like that. But in 5 years, you know, that's going to get sorted out pretty quickly. I mean, in 1 year or 2 years, that's going to be sorted out pretty quickly, and then you're going to get down to a base number, and the administration is going to be a lot less than it was. So to hire 425 permanent new government workers to do a program that really is a heavy lift in year 1 and year 2, and then these people are going to be here for 30 years, that didn't make a lot of sense. And so we want the checks going on to ensure that we're making sure that eligible people that are people that are working, that are seeking education, people that are volunteering their time can continue to get Medicaid and food stamps. But these able-bodied adults that are sitting in their parents' basement playing video games, we need to get them off the rolls. Those are not the people Medicaid is intended for. They should be working, volunteering, or getting an education. But as that workload drops down, we won't have to carry 425 workers for 30 years and pay their health care and all this stuff. So that, I think, we came to a good compromise on, which I was really happy about. We got rid of the Make It in Michigan fund. I haven't seen anyone report on that yet, but we didn't just get rid of what they call BCAR, which we basically got rid of, which is the what is it? Business community? I don't know what it is, but BCAR. That's how they were funding all of the economic development grants when we cut off SOAR, and that's the one where we ended the 21st century tobacco. You know, they were taking tobacco settlement funds and giving them to corporations instead of spending it on health care. It made no sense. We ended those corporate giveaways, but we also got rid of the Make It in Michigan fund, and this was something that during the Democrat trifecta, Whitmer came out with as a way to match funds for all of these Biden-era programs like the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, and the, what was the other one? The CHIPS Act, and all of these Biden-era programs where they were trying to leverage this money for all kinds of green energy programs. We ended that program, so that was a big win. I was very happy to see that. You know, we made major strides in education. We see that Hall Universal Breakfast and Lunch in schools will continue this year, and it'll be universal for all schools, something the Democrats didn't want, but I fought for and we got done. Kids will now be required, the schools will be required to administer the presidential fitness test. That was a big one. That's a big win for the kids. You know, we want to continue to promote physical fitness and health with our kids. Also, we got some language in there That was really important, related to the healthy, hubs. The Hall Universal Breakfast and Lunch in schools will be healthy meals. They're going to be healthy meals. So that's really important, complying with the work of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the Department of Health and Human Services. So that was a big one in there. I was really happy about that. We did a lot on the literacy. And in the 11th hour, some of the special interests came in and tried to kill what they call the letters training, but I didn't let it happen, and neither did Nancy DeBoer and Tim Kelly. We fought them off, and we got a big win there, where they're going to be teaching the teachers how to teach phonics. We need phonics. We need phonics. They call it the science of reading now, but when we got away from phonics, that screwed up a generation of kids in their reading. You see that Michigan is among the lowest reading states. The kids are, 44th in reading. My hope is by doing some of the early childhood spending and teaching phonics and using this letters training to teach the teachers how to teach phonics better, we're going to improve the reading scores. I think we still have to do even more for accountability. There was a little bit we did there for accountability, working with Darren Camilleri. He gave a little more than I think people thought he would, but remember, he owes me. I endorsed him before anybody as leader of the Democrats, and so when we got in the room, I said, look, Darren, we're going to need some accountability if we're going to spend all this money on literacy and on this weighted formula, and he relented, and we got some accountability there, and hopefully more to come in the future, working with Darren Camilleri, who now all of the Democrats have endorsed, but I was the first one. I thought he'd be their best leader because I knew that I could make very good deals with him, and this was just the beginning. More to come there. So I thought overall, and we're not getting enough coverage on a lot of the major policy wins. We saw another plank of heat, the Hall Ethics, Accountability, and Transparency Plan that's going to be signed into law very soon, where we're stopping the politicians from becoming lobbyists, and we're stopping the politicians from being lobbyists while they're politicians. It's amazing that I had to do that, but we actually had Democrat politicians that were lobbyists in other states while they were working here and said they had no conflict of interest. We got rid of that, and we're getting rid of the politicians becoming lobbyists. It's too bad I couldn't get it done fast enough to keep Sam Singh here. I really wanted to, but it's going to be applied to the future, so that future politicians will not be able to leave office right away and become lobbyists. And I think you're going to see very soon why we need this law. In order to get a deal, I had to make it apply starting next year. So I have a feeling you're going to start to see a lot of these Democrats working in the Whitmer administration become lobbyists. We saw one that became a lobbyist, the one that was running DTMB. Now she's a lobbyist. You're going to see a lot more of them now that this budget's done become lobbyists. And you're going to see some of these term-limited Democrats in the legislature become lobbyists. It needs to stop. I think people look at this and say this is a conflict of interest. These people are supposed to be serving the public, but instead they're working on becoming lobbyists. I've been in these negotiations more closely than anyone, and I can tell you that while I'm constantly looking out for the people, you're seeing people that I'm negotiating with that are just looking out for the lobbyists. And I look at it and I say, who are these people? You run for office. How many of them run for office on the platform, elect me so I can go to Lansing and then just implement whatever projects the lobbyists ask for? I've not seen one politician say that yet, but yet that's what happens. They run on a platform to help the people, then they get elected, and then they work for the lobbyists, and then they become lobbyists when they leave office. It's a practice that's going to end now because of the Hall Ethics, Accountability, and Transparency Plan. And I'll say this, what most of the politicians do, and I'm not a politician, But the ones that are politicians, what they do is they go in the private rooms and then they negotiate deals for the lobbyists. I use that influence that I have to do things like this, right? We saw it last year where we forced them through HEAT, the Hall Ethics Accountability and Transparency Plan. We forced them to disclose their pork spending projects, and we made them only apply for pork spending projects that benefit their districts, which was a huge change. They hated that. They'd have to explain what the public purpose is. They'd have to put their name on it. They'd have to explain who the beneficiary is, and they would have to disclose it 45 days before a vote. They hated that. And I think when you look at this list, you're going to see it's a lot better quality list than it was in the past. Now we're doing it again with stopping the politicians from becoming lobbyists, and this is why most people consider me the leader up here at the Capitol when it comes to ethics, accountability, and especially transparency, because we're getting it done with HEAT. And no one thought we could do this, and I did it. And I was really proud to help Ken Borton accomplish his mission. Ken ran for office because the DNR was abusing their power and bullying people that were trying to feed birds. And for years and years, the DNR would harass these people and fine them and do all kinds of things. And I was really proud in this deal we're able to get legislation done that's going to resolve that problem and have a much more sensible policy for the DNR so that people can feed birds in their lawn without having to worry about the DNR showing up and issuing a citation. That was a big win. That's why Ken Borton ran for office, and he got it done. I'm really proud of him. I thought we did some big things with Carl Bonak. Carl and I were up in Marquette recently, and they were telling us about how the housing is way too expensive in Marquette. And it's not just Marquette, it's everywhere. And they're telling us that these big private equity firms and big corporations are buying up all the single-family homes, and it's driving up the costs, and it's reducing the number of homes on the market. And Carl Bodak went to work, and we got that done, and that's going to be signed into law to stop the big corporations and these private equity firms from buying up the single-family homes and raising the costs of buying a home. That was a huge win, and I'm really proud of Carl Bonak for getting that done. So there were a lot of big things that we saw done here. I can interject more of them, but I'll take your questions. Go ahead. Yeah, is there one? Go ahead over here.
Yesterday, the Detroit News reported that the Department of Justice is going to be sending election monitors to 3 cities in Michigan: Detroit, Lansing, and East Lansing. I wanted to know how you respond to that and if you support the move.
Well, I know Eric Nesbitt put out a letter asking for this, and I appreciate that the Trump administration listened to him. And you see that there's going to be some monitors, and I think there should be. I think it's good to have more people watching in these cities to make sure that every vote is counted and that there's no cheating. So I think it's a good development, and I hope that there's more of it as we move toward November.
What do you say to the people who are worried about it being potentially used as an intimidation tactic during elections?
I don't see any problem with having more people watching to ensure that every vote is counted and that there's no cheating. Yeah, go ahead, Jordan.
So wanting to go back to the budget for a second, you're talking about cuts. I've heard a number of people say that RX Kids funding for it has been cut from this current state budget. And the line item is gone, but it said that $20 million has been distributed into other TANF pots that RX Kids can still technically draw from. They're claiming they have not been defunded in the budget. They're telling us that they're confident that $20 million originally earmarked for them remains in the budget. They have access to it. So is it true that RX Kids can still tap into those TANF funds? And do you feel like you accomplished what you set out to do with removing that funding from RX Kids?
Well, I've talked about this for a long time. So there's a lot of programs in the TANF fund. And many of these programs have been around for a long time. Some of the Child Protective Services is funded out of TANF. Some of the cash welfare programs are administered out of TANF. The WIC program is administered out of TANF. And these programs have eligibility requirements, so they ensure that if you receive it, that you have a need, a financial need, that you're a legal citizen, things like that. And what we saw last year was that some of these other programs were running a deficit because TANF money was being diverted to this new program, RX Kids. And we know that RX Kids does not have any eligibility requirements. It doesn't check citizenship. And they're paying out cash to people that have no financial need. Admittedly, they're doing that. And we know they're paying out welfare to illegal aliens and all kinds of people. They're not checking on what they're doing. So like with WIC, you know, the WIC program is supposed to go to like formula and things like that, and they check. That's the only thing you can spend it on. This you could spend on a vacation if you wanted to, and that would be allowed. And especially the people that are financially well off, they're just spending their RX Kids money on perks. They're not spending it on needs because they have the money. Instead, we need programs that are really looking at people with a legitimate financial need, people that are American citizens or here legally, and ensuring that they're getting the things they need to live healthy and to get back on their feet so that they can, you know, eventually, right, get an education or get a job, and when they're able to get off of these systems. Now, we very carefully dissected this. So not only did we take the 20 million out, but I hand selected which ones of those funds they went in. And so this was, I would say this was one of the last parts of the negotiation that got settled. There was a lot of disagreement about where the 20 million would go. So, and I want to remind you that they got $250 million last year. So I would hope that this was a program that they got, all right, so let's say 2 years ago they got 20 million. They spent 2 or 3 of that. And that got, the other 17 million got swept up in the work project victory, where we cut a lot of the wasteful hoarding that the Whitmer administration was doing. They were hoarding money that was not being spent. And that's the whole point of the real dollars spent that the Whitmer administration and the Democrats embraced in this bipartisan budget. They were over budgeting for this. So they gave them 20 million. RX Kids spent 3 million, and we got the other 17 back. Then last year they gave them 250 million. So my hope is that they will spend the 250 million before they try to go and take money from the WIC program and Child Protective Services and the cash welfare programs, the financial assistance programs that actually go to needy families. I hope they won't try to divert their money. I hope that they'll take the 250 million they have. But I carefully selected which lines these went into with the intent of that money going to shore up a lot of these other programs. So that's how I view this.
So just to clarify, summarize there, it sounds like they still can apply. You're hoping that they don't for those TANF pots because the legislature has given RX Kids so much money in the past. Would that be fair to say they can still apply?
So my view is that they will not be eligible for those pots, and that's why I picked them, right? Because I picked specific pots that they wouldn't be able to get, because the other ones, the other pots were the ones that would be, I would describe as much easier for them to get. So I specifically put them into the pots that should be going to these other programs. So if the Whitmer administration I mean, we're talking hypotheticals here, but let's say the Whitmer administration said the $250 million is not enough. So what we're going to do is we're not going to spend the $250 million. And we're just going to set that over here and we're not going to spend it. And then over here, we're going to take $20 million basically from the WIC program and the cash assistance program and other programs that have been underfunded that don't have $250 million. And then in 2 or 3 years, the legislature is going to get the money back from the $250 million that they didn't spend. I would really question that decision by the Whitmer administration. And then in order to do it, they go into pots that RX kids should not be eligible for, and they take it out of those pots. I'll just say if that happens, then I've got a lot bigger problems than that, because basically that would mean that all trust is broken with the Whitmer administration. And I will say that I've never experienced something like that. Despite all of the differences that Governor Whitmer and I have had, I've never experienced something like that where something would happen that extreme against what is supposed to happen. So I don't think it'll happen, and we'll be watching very carefully. Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
The budget included $3 million for transition costs for the governor, including security. Can you explain what you envision that will be spent on?
That was the transition for the next governor.
It's for the next governor and the outgoing governor.
Got it. You know, that was a request of the Whitmer administration. So I would say when we're making these deals, you know, everybody has different things they're trying to do. I've tried to lay out in great detail all of the things that I was trying to accomplish, and that was a priority of theirs, and we gave that to them. So you.
What it's for?
In order to get into the details, I would talk to them because that was their request.
So you voted on it not knowing what that $3 million
I know. By the way, this narrative that we voted on a budget that nobody had seen, I know everything that was in that budget. I'm just saying to get into that level of detail like I just did on RX Kids, I would ask them.
Why can't you explain it if you know it and you understand it? Because this is $1.2 million more than what Snyder got when he left.
1.2
and it
million?
1.2 million more
Okay,
than what
and I
Snyder
cut
got.
$2 million from the arts and culture grants, and no one will report that.
And it
we
lasts
cut from
for
Global
4
Michigan. We
years.
cut from all kinds of places, but this is a request of the Whitmer administration, and we as we're negotiating, we gave them that. So, yeah, go ahead.
Continue on what Jordan was talking about. So what do you think the future of RX Kids is now? Or what would you like to see in the future of RX Kids with diverting that $20 million away from them?
Well, I would say it's less about the future of RX Kids and it's more about the future of these other programs. I mean, if you look at these other programs that many people depend on that have been around for years, we want to make sure that they're funded too. And so I'm hopeful that we'll have a WIC program, that our Child Protective Services will be well funded, that the cash assistance program will be well funded, and they'll continue to look at people's financial need and eligibility, and people that have those needs will continue to get the help they need, but that there will be guardrails on it. So you can't go out, get your WIC money and spend it on gambling. But you could do that with RX Kids, or you could use it to buy a new iPhone, with the right. That's not what this is for. This is supposed to be for formula, for diapers, for health care, for needs of people that that need the assistance. And then I think RX Kids will be just fine with the other $250 million that they have. I mean, 2 years ago they had $20 million, they only spent $3 million. We had to claw 17 back. Now I know they've expanded, but $250 million will go a long way. I mean, you go through this budget, there's not a lot of things that get $250 million if you think about it. Yeah, go ahead, Elena.
I'd like to kind of pull back and talk about top line for the budget. You know, you've said that this year is less than last year, and
Yes,
last
which it
year
is.
was less than the year before. Fiscal year 25, the total spend was 85.6 billion. As numbers are coming through for fiscal year 26, it's looking like that lands somewhere around 87.2 billion. Enacted was 75.9 billion, according to the HFA documents. This year, we're saying that, you know, it's 75 billion. How
75.2.
realistic of a representation is that of what the state actually plans to spend in the next fiscal year? Because this would be 2 years in a row where there's been disagreements about how much money is actually authorized in the budget with that top line. And then we have, you know, 87 billion is way more than 79 billion. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of very dishonest reporting going on. And there's also a lot of dishonest analysis. And I've talked about this CRC, which is a very discredited organization. I've done some research into them. There are a lot of people there that work for Democrats. If you look at their political giving, it's all to Democrats, no Republicans. They're a very political organization. I read one story where the guy's like seeking out ways to prove, I want to report it accurately, but it was like, I'm going to show how detrimental this budget was. I'm still looking at ways to prove it. So I don't give them much credit, but I will say, even with their made up numbers, the guy admits that this budget is smaller than last year. So what I would say is that last year the fiscal agency said it was 75.9. Now I said it was 81.5, right? You guys all falsely reported it was bigger than that. Not all of you. Most of you admitted it was 81.5, but a lot of you guys try to say it was bigger in some of the numbers you gave. I think for this, you got to start with the fiscal agencies, right? And so last year they said, according to you, it was 75.9. This year they say it's 75.2. Some of this stuff that they're fighting about is increased federal spending that we have no say in and no control over. It's like, you know, there's funding that's federal funding that we have discretion over. So we can take the money and we can set rules on how it's administered. And then there's federal funding that we have nothing to do with. It's just federal funding. And what a lot of these states do is they don't count any of it. And you hear people say, well, how could Pennsylvania or North Carolina be roughly the size of Michigan and have such a smaller budget? Well, they don't count any of that. You know what I mean? And so I think in order to get a real measure on what the state legislature, like what is going on in the state of Michigan? And I think what you're seeing the fiscal agencies try to do is they're trying to give you a way to look at, okay, did the state increase or decrease funding? And I think when you're comparing apples to apples here, you're seeing it goes from, I believe you said 75.9 to, I think it was 75.19, but they call it 75.2. And then when you start adding all this stuff like this guy at CRC does, everyone is basically coming to the same conclusion, which is we cut the budget by roughly $800 million over last year. The question is just, do you count a lot of this federal spending, which isn't Michigan spending? And then a lot of that is just guesses and projections. So, you know, that's how we got to 81.5 last year, is we projected it accurately. Other people projected it not accurately. And you can get really confused going through. Now, I understand it all very well, probably better than anyone. But I'm just saying, for those of you who are trying to figure this out, I would stick with the fiscal agencies. Those are the official documents. The governor, us, we're all saying the same thing, which is if you're using apples to apples, it was 75.9 on the fiscal documents. Now it's 75.19, and we've cut government by 800 million, which is a big feat. And I believe it's smaller than the numbers you're reporting, but
I can follow up.
we cut Eagle 30%, and I can go line by line. I mean, does anyone really not think we made like dramatic cuts to this budget? I mean, and by the way, and I'll let you follow up, and then I've got another riff.
The follow-up is if you are your average citizen in Michigan and you're looking at budget top line numbers and you're trying to figure out how much the state is spending.
Yep.
And you see, over the last couple of years, the state has cut $10 billion out of spending. You're like, oh, well, it's that easy. Does that accurately represent the process to people who are trying to understand what the state is doing? Because if it's just a matter of, we're not including that federal funding in the budget top line anymore, then, if you continue doing that, that's no longer an option to show the size of the budget. You know what I'm saying? Like, people will be like, oh, well, it was really easy to cut $10 billion this year. Why can't you do it again? It's like, well, because we're not including federal funding in there anymore. So there's not that same accounting that can be done in the future. So people may not understand what's actually happening with the state budget. They're just seeing the numbers.
Yeah. So I reject the premise that it was 85.2 last year. I've never said that. When I went, and again, this is very confusing, which is why the fiscal agencies and the official records are the records we should be following. You have Republicans and Democrats controlling these organizations, and they're all coming to the same conclusions. But I'll just say, we never said it was 85.2 last year. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get apples to apples comparisons so people can look at these things and figure out what the legislature is doing and what the state government is spending money on
25 to 26.
and what other people are doing to try to cover for the Democrats and to mask some of the big cuts and victories that we got. Is they're trying to add in all of this federal funding that is not state funding, has nothing to do with the state. So the best way to look at what's going on is to take the 75.9 and the 75.2 and to look at where are the differences so they can see, okay, they made some cuts. Now you guys start at like 89 and go to 88, but you're still coming to the same conclusion that we cut government by 800 million. I said last year we cut government by 800 million, and I'm saying we did it again this year, and so the budget's coming down. Go ahead, Beth.
What pressure, if any, has been exerted on the fiscal agencies to remove that federal funding from the top line?
No, I don't think there's any pressure on the fiscal agencies.
Decided to do it on their own?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to get an accurate understanding of what is the state government doing. I mean, and what is the federal government doing? And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to include funding that's discretionary and involves the state. And then you can really measure what the state is doing. So that's what we're trying to do.
My follow-up question to that is kind of in line with Alina's, that this idea that the average Joe looking at this budget and listening to your press conferences gets the impression that the budget has decreased significantly, yet they're not seeing a tax decrease paired with that to reflect it. So, like, I guess, are you fearful of like some disgruntlement among residents who say, hey, we're saving all this money, where is the property tax relief, where is the tax relief that should go along with it?
So again, I reject the premise, and I rejected it last year, that you guys are now bringing in. And most of you did not report these numbers last year. You guys always have different numbers, but most of you did not report these numbers last year. So I don't think the public would be confused unless they were reading certain reporters. But as we're looking at this, we're developing an apples-to-apples comparison, and you can see the budget went down 800 million this year, just like it did last year. And what we're doing is we're giving people a way to really measure what the state government is doing without just tacking on spending that has nothing to do with the state government, and is all projections and often is not what you guys say it is. I did want to also, I wanted to get to Elena's follow-up, but I heard one of you guys, I think MERS podcast, they did a really good job, and you guys should listen to what they said, because I think they were very fair in their analysis. But they played this comment from Sarah Anthony where Sarah Anthony was talking about the lead pipes and water infrastructure. And like all of these things, they blame me. You know, she blames me for this. I just want you guys to know, this is the second year that we've been negotiating with Sarah Anthony. She's never once brought up water infrastructure. She's never once brought up lead pipes. If she cared so much about that, then she would bring it into the room in the negotiation, and she would have gotten it. She would have gotten it. I mean, the things that people really cared about and fought for in this budget, we are in the budget. She never once brought that up over 2 years, so I don't know why she's blaming me for that. I think it's very dishonest and false. She never brought it up once, so it's not that big of a priority. But we saw this effort to get this park in the budget. That was brought up. We see all of the pork spending and the lobbyist protection that was in the budget. That was a priority. So it's kind of interesting to see the spin that goes on after the fact. Yeah, go ahead.
Moving back to talk about RX kids, why did Republicans insist so heavily on removing that $20 million in this budget? Was it purely just for the eligibility reasons, or can you kind of go into that?
Well, we had to make cuts in this budget. I mean, you look at the Medicaid, I didn't even talk about that. I thought we did some really good things on reducing the cost of Medicaid. You saw what the Whitmer administration did was they brought all the lobbyists in that are affected by Medicaid and asked them to figure out what the cuts should be. And they pegged it at $125 million, and they said, we need to make $125 million in cuts. And then the lobbyists got together, and I got the report, and it was like, these cuts could produce somewhere between 0 and 70 million. It was something like that. And it was a range. And I go, 0 or 70 million? Which one is it? It could be 0. And so when we got to the table, we found a solution that actually cut $185 million from Medicaid in waste, fraud, and abuse. And we do that through embracing the benefits of the Trump RX program, which is going to save a lot of money on prescription drugs, going to a single middleman instead of, they have 5 middlemen in these things. What do they call them? PBMs. They have, every one of these people have a different PBM. Instead, there's a single PBM. That's going to be a big one. Cutting administrative costs. And we even found one program in there that was $75 million, which was from the COVID era, where the Whitmer administration, once the COVID money ran out, was just continuing to cover a group of people that were not eligible for Medicaid with general fund dollars, and we got rid of that. So we're going back to the pre-COVID times with that. There were a lot of big things that we did, with the generic drugs and a lot of things to lower. And why are we trying to lower the cost of Medicaid? Because the cost of Medicaid keeps growing. The idea is we want to make this sustainable for people for many, many decades. And so we have to cut costs, and we have to implement work requirements, and we have to eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse so that this goes to the people it was intended for. RX Kids is an example of a program that could really balloon if there are not checks put on it. I mean, this is universal cash assistance for people without any eligibility requirements. I mean, they could be wealthy people, they could be poor people, they can be illegal aliens, they don't have to be legally here. They can spend it on whatever they want. And so what we were trying to do was instead shore up the long-established programs like WIC, like the Child Protective Services, and like the cash assistance, where they have eligibility requirements. You need to have a financial need. You must be here legally. We want to see those programs continue and be properly funded. Yeah, David.
I was just had a technical question. With the SOAR fund, I think there's $5 or $6 million in there. Does that just automatically lapse back to the general fund at this stage, or is there something in the budget that addresses that?
So one of the other things that was another reason why the Republicans decisively won the budget negotiation was because there's billions of dollars sitting all over government in funds. And you pointed out one of them, which is the SOAR fund. There's $500 million sitting in the SOAR fund. So what we could have done is we could have lapsed all of those funds, which they're sitting in all these accounts. And I mentioned they're making $600 million a year in interest off of some of these accounts. So what we could have done is we could have lapsed billions of dollars, and we could have actually increased spending dramatically. We could have just pulled it all into the general fund. We could have done $2 billion in pork easy. It would have been like the Democrat trifecta when they blew through a $9 billion surplus. We chose not to do that. So in the example of the SOAR fund, that $500 million will remain in the SOAR fund, but we're never going to authorize spending that money. With the goal of, in the future, as we're getting a new governor, there's all kinds of money available in government to do an income tax cut or do property tax cuts. And as you're doing that, you can use these funds to really lessen that impact over time and make that more manageable as you're lowering taxes. But I think we should be returning that money to the people. We shouldn't be doing one big spending spree. And so a lot of that money remains, and SOAR is one example, but it's all over government. You would not believe how many billions of dollars is just sitting in accounts in government. And so what I was doing is every time one of the Democrats proposed lapsing one of these funds to close a budget hole, I wrote it down. And so I've got a list of all of them, and I'm going to give that to the next governor, and we're going to work on getting rid of all that wasteful spending. Yeah, go ahead, David.
How much that is total?
It's billions. I could get it to you, but I mean, I have a lot of these numbers in my head, pretty good, but that one I want to double check because I don't want to, I say it's this number and then I'm off by $1 billion, and then, they'll run all kinds of stories discrediting me, but it's billions. And they're making $600 million off of it in interest. Go ahead, Elena.
So the legislature passed some 60-odd policy bills along with the budget. Is that it for the year? Do you plan to come back in the fall and pass any more? Looking ahead, what is there left that the House and the Senate need to get to the governor's desk?
So my original goal for the year was to come in early in the year and pass maybe 30 bills. So last year, at the end of the year, we negotiated maybe 30 bills. And I thought there were maybe another 30 that were low-hanging fruit that we could have got done last year, but just kind of fell to the wayside because we ran out of time. So my hope was we'd come in early this year and we'd do those 30. What we found was that the Democrats were resisting the funding for Selfridge and the clean supplemental a lot more than I anticipated. I thought that would be very easy to get done, just like I thought the medical licensure compact would be very easy to get done. But we were met by a lot of resistance from Democrats. And so what happened is those two issues kind of sucked up a lot of the, say, first 4 or 5 months of the year, and we didn't get those 30, 40 bills done. So that kind of pushed that into the budget conversation. As we were doing the budget, it kind of changed on a day-by-day basis. Like, one day there were 50, 60 bills that were going to go. The next day there were 0 bills that were going to go. And then the next day it was back to 50, 60. The next day it was 0. I mean, it was a real roller coaster as we were doing that. You might remember early on, the governor did not even give Jen Flood the authority to negotiate targets because they were so focused on a lot of these bills. Fortunately, when I said, look, I'm just going to go do this deal with Winnie Brinks, that brought the governor's team back to the table. Jen Flood was empowered to discuss targets. We got a framework very quickly, and unfortunately it took a while to do targets because the Democrats were having such a hard time with these cuts. I mean, you know, when you dangle a 30% cut to Eagle as a target, you could see why the Democrats struggled with that. And so over time, as they continue to, like David talked about, look for ways to lapse all of these funds so that they didn't have to make any cuts. And we just continued to resist that. Eventually, we got to a deal that had the targets, and then you saw the subcommittees go to work. Meanwhile, alongside, there was kind of an effort with different personnel to negotiate bills. And the idea was always, we're going to get the budget right, and then if we get the budget right, hopefully we'll get the bills too. But like I said, that was a touch and go day by day. And so in the end, we ended up with something like 65 bills, maybe it was 67. But we came through that, and I would describe it as, you know, to get some of those last outcomes we needed on the budget, or they needed on the budget, bills were traded in that process, and it got up to 67. So what we tried to do is we tried to get the language right on all these different bills so it was ready to go if we made a deal on those bills. And ultimately, we did that, and I was really happy we got the revolving door in there to stop the politicians from becoming lobbyists. I was really happy Carl Bonak got his big effort done to stop the corporations and the private equity from buying up homes. I was really happy to see Ken Borton accomplish his goal with the out-of-control overreach from the DNR. And there were others too. You know, some of these people, it was their first public act. I mean, the Democrats had been blocking Alicia St. Germain from getting a bill for the whole time she's been here. So I was happy we finally broke through that. And there were many others that we got in the deal. So we did that. You know, I wish we would have got medical debt across the line. That kind of got hung up because Sarah Anthony, you know, wants 6 PAs instead of 1 PA in that deal, so we'll work through that. The Democrats are very resistant to the hospital price transparency, which is really important as part of that deal. So we didn't get medical debt across the line. That was a unfortunate thing because everyone agrees on it, but you know, until Sarah Anthony gives up a few bills and they accept the medical hospital price transparency, that one is stalled. So I'm hopeful we'll get that one done in the fall. You know, I'm hopeful that we'll still get a deal on property tax before the end of the year. And also our hospital affordability board, I think, is really important. So I would say that as we were doing these bills, I think it was a good opportunity for Leader Brinks and I to discuss some other things and kind of let those percolate for a while. So I threw some things on the table, she threw some things on the table, and hopefully those percolate, and maybe in the fall we can come back and do some more. I reject this reporting that I saw that this has anything to do with who's going to win the election. We've had a plan, and we've been perfectly executing that plan the whole way. You know, when we get to lame duck, we might do lame duck, we might not. It just depends on whether I think we have an advantage in lame duck. I mean, if you look at lame duck, Winnie Brinks is going to be done. That's the end of her time in the legislature. Governor Whitmer's going to be gone. And I'll continue on as speaker for 4 more years. So I could do a deal if I think there's a good deal to be made. And if I don't think there's a good deal, I'll wait it out and I'll do it next year. So we'll see. But this had nothing to do with the election. It was all about kind of finishing what I'd hoped we'd done in the first quarter, and then some trading specifically for the budget. And it was a good outcome, and I think we're still on pace. If you look at 2-year runs of the legislature and how many public acts there are, I like the pace we're on. I think we'll still be at a pace of the fewest public acts going back at least 200 years, which I'm happy about. I think people don't want more bills. They want a more efficient government. And then once the bills are passed, they want the legislature to have oversight and make sure the laws are being properly executed. Go ahead.
In the budget, there's language that prevents the Attorney General from initiating lawsuits against gas and oil companies. I was just wondering what's the reasoning behind that conclusion?
We wanted to make it very clear what the intention of the legislature was. The legislature, and this speaks for the entire legislature, right? Republican and Democrat. We all voted for this. You know, we don't want our Attorney General suing the federal government. We don't want our Attorney General, you know, filing these lawsuits against oil and gas companies for political reasons. We want her working on consumer protection and fighting against you know, people that are scamming us and all the other legitimate functions of the Attorney General. So I was happy we got it in there, and it's very clear what the legislature's intent is for her to spend the money. All right, well, thanks, guys. We'll do this again, but probably not. I'll give you a little break, but I got to keep you guys informed, so thanks for being here. Hopefully this was informative.